In your market news now, Asian stocks slipped and so did the region's currencies this morning as virus cases rose in South Korea and Japan and investors quit local assets in favour of safety further afield. China has reported a large drop in new cases and announced an expected interest rate cut to buttress its economy. But that came together with a jump in infections in South Korea, 2 deaths in Japan, and researchers finding that the pathogen spreads more easily than previously believed. Japan's Nikkei was also in positive territory thanks to an overnight slide in the currency, a boon for exporters, but gains were pared as more cases of infections outside of China hurt sentiment. The Japanese Nikkei moved up 0.03% to close out at 23,479 index points. The Hang Seng Index was down, unfortunately, slipping by 0.33% to 27,577 points, while the Shanghai Composite was a big climber again, taking in 1.8% of gains to close at 3,030 index points. Over in the United States, the S&P 500 and Nasdaq rose to record highs last night as optimism that China would take more measures to prop up its economy eased concerns about the economic impact of the coronavirus epidemic. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose by 0.4% to 29,347 points. The S&P 500 gained almost 0.5% to 3,386 points, while the Nasdaq Composite Index added 0.9% to close at 9,817 index points. Well, for more on the markets, we cross now to my colleague Arabile Gumede, who can give us more detail as to what's what. Over to you, Arabile.
Yeah, good afternoon, Nompu. Look, it certainly has been an interesting market picture over the last week as well. And certainly today is pretty much the case. It's a mostly flat market stance for now here at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, with the local currency, however, being the one most affected there. As you made note of, the Asian market, a bit of a mixed picture there. So no certainty really on to who's going where exactly, although there is some positivity, particularly out in Shanghai, considering then that they have tried to boost that market with quite a bit of stimulus, considering that COVID-19 is affecting just how things are going in that market. So a lot of work still to be done, I suppose, when it comes to the market, and getting a sense of calm after the coronavirus or COVID-19 is certainly impacting just the growth picture and just how companies are able to perhaps survive or keep things going. Very recently, we even got word from Puma saying that half their stores out in China have still closed, and that may affect their production. And so they're worried about where things may go up to, and they may struggle, particularly in the first quarter of the year. So things are going to get very difficult from here on in unless some sort of plan is made with regards to finding a restrictive measure for the coronavirus. That still is the big news point globally. On the local front, we still have some equity news then as well. A host of retailers, that being Woolworths and Truworths, did release some of their interims as well, with Discovery also coming out as well. Anglo American coming out and saying that their revenue picture is looking slightly rosy, up around 9% there, and Anglo Platinum then announcing a new CEO after, of course, Chris Griffith stepped down earlier this week. Let's unpack exactly what the numbers look like, though, on a global perspective, and we'll get into the details right after this. Well, as you can tell, they're quite significant that the gold price has gone above the 1,600 mark. So that tells you really just the kind of demand as investors perhaps move away then from riskier investments and head off into safe havens. Gerbrand Smith from NEF here joins us here at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Thank you so much for the time, Gerbrand. It's been an interesting market picture this year, a whole lot, everything from World War III almost happening at the start of the year. And now we have the coronavirus, which is of course impacting market movement. Is there a sense that perhaps later on we'll get some sense of stability and maybe then normality will prevail?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. If we look at the figures every day and you look at some of the death rates that's coming down and the new cases been reporting coming down as well, so that's a good sign. Still just 70,000 people. I know it's a lot, but 70,000 people out of 1.4 billion people in a specific country. So I think they'll get it under control. Hopefully in time, so that some of our bigger companies on the global front won't have supply issues, because lots of the factories are operated in China, and we even had Woolworths today with its results saying, some of the goods coming from China as well, and Truworths as well. So not a concern at the moment, but if it keeps on longer than what we expect, then it might be a problem of some of the products.
The bigger local companies that are bound to be affected by coronavirus, you reckon?
No, you would have expected that some of these resource companies and resource prices would have a bit of a pullback, but they're throwing a lot of stimulus into China at the moment. We had the overnight interest rates coming down as well, from 4.8, I think, close to 4%.
Sure.
And a lot of other, we know that they're good at doing stimulus whenever they need it in the consumer space and on the commodity space. But normally you would have you had Kuma coming out as well, so they said they looking at about a 15% reduction in a month's time on iron ore shipments, etc. So the longer the steel manufacturers and companies do have their doors closed, the more direct effect they will have. I think the first one would probably be commodity companies.
Yeah, it's certainly going to hurt and continue to do so. But it doesn't look that case when you see a palladium price at $2,700 a fine ounce, and platinum there and thereabouts of 1,000, gold 1,600.
Yeah, a lot of fears around. And we had also no spending, especially in the platinum palladium sector, for many years.
Yeah.
The ounces coming out of the ground is probably similar to what it was 10 or 15 years back. And I think demand picked up over time. So there's a bit of a deficit and people are scrambling towards that. Very interesting. 2 years back, nobody wanted to own any platinum counters, and today everybody was hoping it was in their portfolios. And everybody's scrambling to buy some. Not cheap anymore. But
Still
yes, it can probably go longer a little bit, because we had a massive downturn and no investment into the sector for many years.
Yeah. All right. Well, Amplat's then go and announce a new CEO as well, Natasha Viljoen. Perhaps not too much known about her, but still, she has been part of Anglo for quite some time as well, head of their processing unit in terms of the group, that is. A significant change up, but one that perhaps the market is liking?
Yeah, look, I think Chris Griffith's probably the guy who's probably called some of the markets in the commodities cycle exactly correct. He was in Kuma when it was going well there. He's leaving at the top at Anglo Platts, hopefully not the total top, but he's gotten a few things right. So she got a big shoes to fill. It's going to be difficult because there's lots of expectations now when companies do very well at the moment. But hopefully she'll be up to the task, and let's see. She's one of the best three candidates that they had internally. They appointed I think it was as expected.
And at the same time, Anglo American then pulls out their report. I mean, overall, I suppose we expected it, considering that Amplats and Kumba did so well. Their revenue going up quite substantially as well.
Yeah, the earnings, I think, went up about 9% over the previous year. We know iron ore, like you said, was one of the good factors, and on the other side, we had platinum pumping for them. I think it was much expected. It's close to about a 10p multiple. If you look at what the consensus were on most platforms, probably in line with expectations. It's a far fetch from where they were 3 years back, 50 rand and scrambling for cash to keep the balance sheet intact. Now they got a good balance sheet, only about, I think, 0.5 to EBITDA multiple. Debt, it's about 5 billion in debt. In dollar terms, they're doing a few new deals with fertilizers, etc. They look good in shape, but it's not as cheap as it were 3 years back.
No, certainly not. Definitely not as cheap. All right, very quickly, you touched on it a little bit earlier, but we can just unpack the earnings. Woolworths, Truworths. It's not easy in this retail space when the global economy just seems to be faltering.
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult space to be in. We know Woolies had some problems. Those same problems are persisting. Without IFRS 16, they had earnings down about 12%. Truworths, I think, actually got surprised the market. You would have thought that clothing would have a bit of a down on earnings, etc. They came out with flat earnings. They're struggling at the moment in the UK and in South Africa. So the macro environment not conducive for good earnings for none of these companies.
But to pull off half, I mean, or to pull off flat is.
I think it's a great management company. Our company's been brilliantly managed over time. It's not the right place to be at the moment, and that's reflected into the share prices. It's half from where it were a year back. It's trading up, I think, 43, 44 rand a share. Dividend yield of 8. So if there's any green shoot in the South African market, those are probably the companies you want to hold.
All right, very quickly, Rand 1509, continued weakness. Is that just coronavirus linked?
I think it's a bit of a emerging market sell-off that we had from middle of Jan, and it's continuing at the moment. So safe haven demand as well. So people are piling back into the dollar. All the other currencies are taking a bit of a battering. You had the Australian currency as well taking a battering over the last month or two. So I think it's of that, and then we'll maybe a bit of anticipation on the budget. It's a difficult budget, and let's see what they can accomplish.
Less than a week to go until Finance Minister Tito Mboweni delivers that. Gerbrand, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it. Gerbrand Smith there from NEFG joining us here at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange as we get into that market picture. Pretty much flat for now in this midday trade, with the rand weakening past that 15 rand level, 1509 odd against that US dollar. So we'll continue to unpack it and see how things fare, of course, across the day right here on SABC News. Do stay tuned for that. My colleague Nompumelelo Siziba joins you right after the short break. But for me, though, that's where the buck stops.